Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Chang. Today, I'll be the moderator for Mantisa College and tie up with PPA for our DBA program. I'm very happy today to have Dr. Charles Chow with us and Mr. Injek Ungu Harun. Right, both of them has been involved in the plantation industry. Dr. Charles have been with TradeWin and also currently the CEO for KUB Agro, and he has 40 years of rich experience with him. Still very much involved in the plantation sector. Meanwhile, Injek Unku Harun is the expert in the human resource area, has been involved in this area for 35 years, formerly with Johor Corp and MDEC. Okay, I will start off with inviting both the gentlemen. Um, Hi, Dr. Chow.
Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Injek
Hi.
Onku. How are you guys doing?
Good afternoon. I'm fine, thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Basically, we are going through two different sessions, right? The first part we go through a 20 minutes, probably about six questions, and we will go through interval asking, right? After that, we move on to a specific question directly just for Dr. Charles, then Injek Unku, all focusing on the area of leadership. Okay. May I proceed?
Yes,
Right.
please
Okay.
do. Thank you, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very pertinent question. I've been always asked, what is leadership? Well, allow me to start off by giving the definition for it. Leadership is defined as the process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done in a business setting and how to do it. And more importantly, the process of facilitating individuals and, of course, the collective efforts to accomplish objectives, more of the shared objectives here, and also the common goals of an organization. Fundamentals central to leadership. It entails leadership is a process. And essentially, leadership involves influencing others in the company. Leadership becomes a happening within the context of a group. And of course, leadership involves creation of goals and goals attainment. And these goals are shared among leaders and their followers in any organization. And what is also fundamentals in leadership is about change. Leaders are basically change agents. Having involved in the turnaround of two companies and now the third one, leaders do create new systems or refine systems and processes in the company. And managers require and eventually help to elevate them up to a new level of change in some basic ways, and also ways to take advantage of new frontiers, new possibilities, creating possibilities out of, I used to term it impossibilities, and creating new values in the company. This is how my perspective of leadership is being presented. And with this, I hope the description have provided you some insights about what leadership is all about. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. Let me start by first talking why leadership is important from my perspective. Leadership is something that has been fascinating me for most of my life. And why it became an important area for me was because um, in the early part of my life, I was very interested in the military. I still am. I am a bit of a military historian and enthusiast. And I got to study about great military leaders. So the thing that always went to my mind was what make these people become so powerful and so effective? And it's about their leadership style. Of course, as I went into the course of my career, the military model of leadership is very, very unique and will not be really fully accepted or applicable in the business world. So we have to learn things from a non-military perspective. Now, I would like to just take a little bit of time to say that um, when you look at leadership, you got to understand first the basis, the basis, the different types of models, and there are four different models depending on how you study the art of leadership. There are four different types of models, and you can be an autocratic person, you can be a democratic or participative person, you can exercise the laissez-faire leadership style, or you can be a paternalistic a person. So it depends on the leadership style that you apply in your organization, and there are pros and cons for each one. But at the end of the day, it's about how your organization will be able to adapt and the culture that it professes in order for you to be able to do so in your role as a leader. So I think that's the initial part that I would just like to share with you right now. Okay, Daniel.
This is a very interesting question. What is the impact that leaders can bring to the organization and community? My experience in the plantations, well, has really allowed me to come to the first-hand experience with that. As a leader, the direct impact that comes from within start off with the trust on overall performance and commitments coming from the leaders. The impact also entails the business development from the very onset. And with that perspective, you'll find leaders bring in the vision to establish the goals for the company in the short term, long term, and then also the mid-term perspective. And the leaders in respective organizations have this broad-based influence of the people. This is where they lead towards a set goals, certain a set vision. And of course, then you would see it as a major cultural change in any company. This is where this change management do sets in the impact that the leaders bring in the organization. I would rather speak on the organization and later on also on the perspective from the community perspective. Well, in addition to that, there is uplifting of a trust in the company. In the plantation sector, trust is a major attribute that need to be looked upon and focused by any plantation leaders or business leaders. And that is also a change in the strategic orientation for leaders. This is one of the major impact that they bring onto the organization. When I say strategic orientations, this is where it starts off with a clear strategic plans that they do consider in drafting out and creating the vision for the company, and the long-term plans that have been set up through their strategic planning with our team, leading a sort of a direction that is clear, is defined, and with clear action plans with all the attributes that are required for a successful and outcome of the business. And of course, there is also the perspective that leaders, the impact include bringing in the people leadership. They take care of the community, they take care of the followers, they take care of the staff. They take up the whole population that is under his care. Well, for the plantation sector, having dealt with more than 16,000 employees, it is essentially important that as a leader, we set up the sort of this impression with our people, and the behavior that we carries the sort of impact greatly, and the confidence that we enthuse towards the community will enliven the professionals and also the organization perspective and also the success of the company. More importantly, the leaders believe on trust and also honesty, with the greater focus on integrity, brings in much value to the behavioral change, particularly if there is a turnaround sort of initiative or turnaround perspective undertaken by the leaders concerned. So the message that is taken by any leaders in the organizations will be able to reflect the message, the innate message that the leaders hope to bring to the company. And this is where the commitments and the passion from the leaders carries a lot of impact and creates a lot of impact to the community and also the organization. Well, other than that perspective, we also look at leadership have very strong influence on the formation of community cohesion. This is a perspective that is in any community of a company. It contributes to the community development process, and that also a social value that we have to consider. And beside the social value, there are also the processes and the systems that is related to social integrity, the organizational integrity per se. This is also what I would say that is the foundation of community cohesion. Well, in any setting, in any organization, this is pivotal. And accordingly, a quality leader is needed to form a very strong cohesion with his community, with the staff in the organization. So these are some of the impacts it can bring. And of course, we still look into the concern of emotional healing when certain perspective, when you find that the community or the organization, the leaders have to be mindful of the some of the emotional healing that needs to be undertaken under his leadership. And as I earlier mentioned, the ethical behavior of a leader is crucial. And that is tantamount to the ability of the leaders to lead the organization, also to garner the respect of the community. And of course, last but not the least is the leaders. One of the major impact it carries is to the ability to create value in the organization and the community. That's all from me on the impact that leaders can bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. Right. Well, indeed, it's such a vast and broad area. It seems like leadership is not just, I mean, leadership in organization is not just about making profit. This day, the job description has widened, right? So let us find out from Unku, right? Uh, I think the next pertaining question that I have is basically, can leadership skill be acquired or learned? Could it be trained? Uncle, what is your
Okay,
take on this?
very interesting. This is something that has been asked by a lot of people. Can it be nurtured, or is it by nature? If you look at how leaders were created in the old days, in the about 200-300 years ago, there was a certain standing that if you were born into a family of the nobility, or if you were a member of royalty, you were born to be a leader. Now, as we progress into the 20th century, we found out that, and this is something that what happened during the world wars, especially the First World War, the pool of leaders was drying up because many of them were getting killed. And as the military expanded, especially in my study of the British Army, what they found out was that they were very, very short of leaders. So then they had to experiment about creating leaders. So that's where the nurture comes in. And they had to create all these OCTUs, Officer Cadet Training Units, which have lasted right up to the present day. So the question is, are they natural born leaders, or are they nurtured? My view is that leaders can be nurtured, they can be trained, they can be created, but there is a small group of people who have a certain innate ability to command the loyalty, to command the a group of people under their charge, and that somehow is a bit innate. Some people have it, and but most people don't. And but because today in the current environment, you need many leaders, you have to resort to creating leaders or nurturing leaders. Now, the question is, has it been successful? I would say yes, because a lot of work has gone into it. From the HR perspective, what we do is that we take people through assessment centers. So before we even take them to the assessment centers, we do a lot of organizational psychology studies on what are the competencies required to be a successful leader. Once we define them, then we are able to develop a leadership framework. And I always advise people, study your organization, because the leadership framework in an organization will be different from another, depending on your corporate culture, depending on your value system, depending on the nature of the business you are in. Like, for example, Dr. Chow mentioned about the plantation industry, for which he has spent many, many years. The requirements to be a leader in the plantation industry is vastly different from that, let's say, be in the financial services industry. I've been in both, and I can see the very big difference. In the plantation industry, you are expected to be a man who knows everything. You are expected to take charge. So in many ways, you exercise a lot of authoritarian style of behavior. And that was very true in the early days, because you were required and it was expected that you would exercise that kind of leadership. But if you try to do that in today's environment, in the financial services industry, if you do in a knowledge economy, that kind of style of working will not work at all. So you got to understand all this. Then from your value system, the type of business that you are in, you develop the leadership framework. And from the leadership framework, you take your pool of people and take them through it. You'll be surprised. I was working in one organization not too long ago, and we took about 50 people through an assessment center. Okay. Sometimes they call them acceleration centers, but the right term is called assessment centers. And we tested them over 2 days on a range of 10 competencies on what it would take to be successful in a modern business environment. And I can tell you that from the 50 people that we tested, that my team and I tested, fully three-quarters did not have the potential to rise up the career ladder to go to the C-suite level position. So it was a very, very an eye opener, very, very jarring to me, because all these people were bright, intelligent. They had served their companies well, because I'm talking about a group here, an investment group, which had about several strategic business units under it, and they had very good annual performance appraisals. But when it came to the assessment, we found out that out of the 35 people, only 15 had the potential, had the inner quality to be groomed to go to the C-suite level. So those are the things which I just wanted to share with you, and that it affected the way that we had to our planning on developing the next generation of leaders. And it was very, very scary for me, because it showed that we didn't have enough leaders to take over. And I did a lot of work also in a GLC in this area, and we found out that when we did the studies, there was going to be, among the GLCs itself at that point in time, I'm talking about 10 years ago, a shortage of over 1,000 to 1,200 leaders at various levels, from manager to a director. So there's a lot of work, and you don't have a choice. You need to go into the nurturing side, because you cannot
Wow.
have the natural born leader. There's not enough of them.
I can truly understand where you are sharing the point. Right now, we are deciding between
Mhm,
traditionally it's very much by
mhm,
nature. Now we are moving to new age. Is we need to
mhm,
nurture the leaders,
mhm.
right?
Yes.
And each company have to prepare their own leadership succession.
Mhm,
Generally speaking,
mhm. But
okay.
one thing which I want to add,
Hmm.
Daniel, is that um, when you take people through an assessment and you find out where they are and you are able to define the gaps, there will be certain levels of discomfort in a number of people in
Hmm.
trying to bridge that gap,
Right.
because you have an innate behavior. You're born with it to be a certain person, but you have to demonstrate a different personality in your work life.
Yeah.
So when those two don't come together, you are under stress, and that can create a lot of
Yes.
uh, issues for you. I have known people who are very, very extrovert and can go in front of a crowd of people and give a great presentation, but their real nature is that they like to be very quiet and very private.
Hmm.
They do not like to be around people. They, in their own home environment, they prefer to just spend time with themselves, with their family,
Hmm.
or just by themselves. So if
Okay.
the stress level is too high, when we do psychometric profiling on these people, if the stress level is too high, something will give, and that's something that
Wow.
the HR person needs to be very aware of when you do psychometric profiling.
Okay. Very interesting. Now I have to move on to the next
Mhm,
question.
mhm,
Uh, okay. Dr. Chow. Dr. Charles, right? How can good leadership influence the team performance? Now we are narrowing down to the crux of it, the fun of it. I hand over the screen to you.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Well, before I touch on the influence of on team performance from good leadership, let me touch on the critical characteristic that are needed for good leadership before the influence can be exerted on the team for performance betterment or improvement. A leader needs to have top of the list will be, of course, integrity and honesty, without which leadership will fail. We don't have to go to the next stage in any establishment, particularly in plantation. I am a strong believer, and I have a zero tolerance for any compromise on integrity or honesty. A failure in the level of integrity in any company would mean a failure in the leadership and a failure in the performance of the company. And the well-being of the company will be totally destroyed. So this is one of the attributes that must be safeguarded by any team leaders, particularly any great leaders that to be created in any establishment. But sadly, we have seen a lot of leaderships, in a negative perspective, that is bringing down countries, bringing down companies, bringing down used to perform extremely well establishment or organizations go tumbling down, all because of corruption, all because of compromise on integrity, and there's a level of honesty have been virtually given up by the team leaders or the leaders concerned. And of course, leaders have to exude confidence to lead a team because they have been looked upon by the whole community, by the whole followers in the company. If the knowledge base is shallow and you find that it lacks the level of confidence in him to influence the team, it is an impossibility. And you find that without that, your team performance will be misdirected and you lack the clear directions. And this is something that is detrimental to the well-being of the team performance. Then, of course, the team leader have to be a very effective communicator. He's a very good planner. Without feeling which information or goals that are supposed to be very clear and defined will not be conveyed down to the followers or the staff concerned or the community in the company. So these are some of the perspectives that are needed. And of course, the leader have to show a high level of accountability, and without which various perspectives of the well-being of the business will definitely be compromised. And from my latest, the recent research that I've already conducted is the level of empowerment. Well, empowerment can be defined as the process of supporting another person to discover and claim a personal power in them. Well, my research established very interestingly that empowerment is the key to improve employee performance. So coming to that perspective, other than accountability, there's of course the level of creativity in the leaders has to be of a certain level, and the display of empathy is essential. And in fact, I would rate it as one of the critical factors that any great leaders should possess. Failing which, the level of emotional intelligence will be not to the level of expectation, and the level of self-awareness of a leader will not be meeting the sort of expectation of the people or under his, they can lead by him. And of course, beside the self-awareness, the leaders have to be able to self-manage themselves from just some of the attributes that I have discussed or highlighted. So with that in place, you find that a leader have to be able to articulate clear and very defined goals and vision to the team for the team performance, without which there will be a misdirection. And in addition to the articulation of the clear and defined vision or goals or objectives, there must be a set action plans for effectiveness. So this is how a good leader will influence the team members towards a certain level of result outcome. And of course, the leader have to create a conducive working environment, not to having a session where they'll be humiliated during the meeting because of some failures, allow some mistake to be made, allow mistakes that are genuine, but there's not a question of being compromised because of integrity. It's a totally different thing. So in the plantation sector, it's a very disciplined setting. It is no nonsense. It would say some of them may describe the planters as a no nonsense lot. And with that, you find that a great leader to influence team performance, he must be a great problem solver, right? So having the sort of a clear insight of the problem, the underlying causes, he should examine very carefully, encourage feedback from the team, provide the needed guidance from the year of experience. Of course, any leader should be mindful that if you have, for example, if I'm 40 years experience in a plantation, I cannot consider the weakness in the manager if he's only with 7 years experience. So we should be on the mentoring sort of capacity to guide, to encourage feedback, and to provide the necessary added guidance to the managers or the staff concerned. And of course, more importantly is when we conduct meeting or follow-up assessment, it has to be effective. Clear outline, advanced information should be provided, well prepared ahead of time, and a good, effective managed leader will influence the team performance through also the effective monitoring of all aspects. But to be in the know, what I would sum it up as to be in the know of the various goals or objectives or activities or operation needs. That will be a key sort of approach to ensuring that the team performance will be safeguarded and able to reach the sort of milestone set by the leader. So over to you, Daniel. Thank you.
Wow, this is a lot of insight, and to take it on one shot is not certainly not easy. But generally, from what I really understand, the key underlying value very strongly tied back to integrity, and also the role of the leader is actually to empower their succession, what we call the next line of manager, next line of leaders through multiple approach, right? So yeah, indeed, all these are very important aspect that's not easily learned and have to acquire through the process. And with this, I probably have to bring back Onku. Just give me a moment. Onku,
Okay. Yes. Well,
how do we detect good leadership trait? I know
okay.
just now you mentioned something on the psychometric, those very important aspect of it. Okay, I
Yes,
hand the
yes,
screen
that's
back
right.
to you, or
Okay.
for
Okay, I'm going to answer this question, but before I do so, I'd just like to touch on a couple of areas, which was also covered by Dr. Chow just now. I've always been asked this question: is there just one way of leadership? Do we just follow that one particular style, and it is something that is something that you're developed and you're trained to do so throughout your time as a leader? Now, I just want to share that it depends. It depends because it depends on the situation that you are in. And this is where there was a study, a book on situational leadership. I'm not sure whether the audience have read this book. It was written by Ken Blanchard and another guy, but it was associated with Ken Blanchard. And what he says was that the situation that you face in will vary from one to another, and the type of problem solving that you have to apply will also be different. And there are four styles of leadership that you can apply. If you are working with a team that is being cobbled together for the short term for a project, or if the members of the team are very young who lack experience, you have to be authoritarian and you have to take the lead. And that's where you do a lot of telling, directing, and also guiding. If you have to go into a situation where you have a more capable team, you want to be more democratic in your approach. Okay, that's where you do a lot of selling, a lot of coaching, and a lot of explanation on why things should be this way. And this is the American style. The Americans are very, very open society, and even though they may not have a high level of education in their team, they always will answer, they will always question your rationale. They're not the type of people who will accept orders. They want to understand the rationale for those orders, why they have to do it. So you got to spend a lot of time to explain to them. And because many of them have got experiences, have got capability, and they do not want to follow orders blindly. So in this kind of situation, there's no such thing as yes sir, no sir, two bags full. It's not like that at all. Like the way it is in the military. Now, the third style of leadership, which is very very popular, and this is where the part about Dr. Chow mentioning about empowerment. This is where you exercise delegation, where you empower people. But when with empowerment and delegation, you as a leader need to monitor closely. Okay, and it's good to apply this leadership style in a situation where you have an experienced team, people who have been with you for a while. And this is certainly confirmed by my own experience. When I got together a team in my last job, they were very new to me, and after 3 years with me, they knew what needed to be done. They were exposed. They had heard, they had read and been told about my vision, what I had in mind for the organization, that the group going forward for over a 5 year time frame. And we were able to launch a number of initiatives. But because they were very capable and they had understood what my objectives were, they were able to do things with very little supervision. That kind of situation only comes about after a few years with the team. So that's the style of delegation and empowerment. But as a leader, you cannot just let go of things. You got to have a grip on things. And that's where your monitoring is very important. Do not exercise the laissez-faire style where you just totally abdicate your responsibility as a leader. And I see it very common in this country. People at the highest level, they over rely on their subordinates. It's good to rely, it's good to delegate, it's good to empower, but you must also check, check, and check. You must have a reporting system where you're able to see whether things are going along well or not. And then if it's not going well, you must be ready to come up with the intervention plan, because that's why you are the leader. You are the person who has got all this responsibility. The accountability is yours. You have got all the experience, and you should have the know-how. If you don't have the know-how and the capability to be in that role, you have no business being in that role, because no one will respect you. And that's why even in I see right now, you see announcements about people being appointed to key positions in some companies, and which I won't go into to say who and where. But sometimes when I look at these names, I really wonder in my mind, whether they are the right people, because sometimes you hear stories about their personality, and they are not the right people to be in those roles. Okay, the final style is on the where you require people who have a certain experience and can do things on their own. You will have that kind of a situation where you have subordinates who, by their own merits and their own capability, are very, very capable and do not need to be told what to do. In fact, they are self-directed. In this case, you just need to just create alignment, and because the follower has the capability, but maybe sometimes not the self-confidence. I remember a situation in my one of my jobs where I had a very, very good technical person, but he could do the HR piece very, very well. But the problem with his character was that he was a very shy person. Now, I'm a very extrovert person. I can go in front of 1,000 people and I can give a speech. So I made use of him in that sense to churn out the technical stuff on the HR piece, because I know that he wouldn't be comfortable to exercise supervisory roles. And so as long as you make sure that you create alignment, because you have to appeal to his sense of intelligence. He's got a very high level of intelligence. You cannot just dismiss him, but you make use of that skill set in order to push things through. Now, that's on the one side. The other part which I want to talk about is, and also touching on what Dr. Chow had mentioned, in my training as an HR practitioner and as a leader over the last 30 some years, yeah, there are 5 areas that you need to be good at. 5 good practices. The first one, you got to model the way. You got to clarify the value system. You got to be the example. I think Dr. Chow mentioned that. You have to be the one who is a good role model. If you are not a good role model, if you come to work late, you are not a good role model. If you go into a meeting and you fall asleep, you are not a good role model. If you are not participative, you lack the know-how, the technical know-how. You cannot rely on your people for everything. But if you lack that technical know-how, you are not a good role model. And then, of course, the parts about the value system. The second piece is you must have a shared a vision, and you must share it with your people. Get them on board. And I was able to do that in my last role, where I developed a 5-year HR master plan. And I laid down my vision, the direction, the mission, and I laid down about 10 or 12 strategic objectives that had to be achieved during that period. Then I went on a selling mode. So I met up with all the HR heads of 7 strategic business units in that investment organization, and I was able to do the selling, and they came on board. And that's how we were able to gel together as a team going forward in implementing the vision. And I'm pleased to say that as a result of the work that we did, we were able to win 2 awards by the MIHRM. So get your people on board. You must have a vision. If you're a leader, you don't have a vision, there's something wrong there. Okay. The third area, and I got 5. The third area, challenging the way things are done. Seek the initiative, and then take the risk in trying new things. You cannot be contented. You cannot be accepting of the way things have been done. We've been doing it for the last 20 years, and that's the way we're going to be doing it. You can't do that. The business world today is in a state of flux. It has always been in a state of flux for the last 20 years. But now with the COVID-19 pandemic, even more so. You got to challenge the way things are done. You got to come up with new ways. You got to take the initiative. Do not let the top guy come over to your office one day and tell you what to do. You got to bring the problem to him. You got to do the situation appraisal, and then you got to do the diagnostics. Go and see him and present to him, and then tell him what you want to do in terms of initiatives. Okay, that's the third one. The fourth one, and this is what Dr. Chow mentioned, empowerment. Empowerment is very good. It's very important because it encourages teamwork. It encourages buy-in. It builds competencies and self-confidence in your people. Because at the end of the day, the job of a leader is to build his team to be leaders. Because you won't be in that role forever. Remember that. The last final thing, the final piece is motivation. Motivate the troops, set the expectation, and recognize the achievements. We don't do enough of that. I find that in my experience in Western multinational companies, they focus a lot on celebrating successes, but we don't do that so much in an Asian environment because we think that that's what we are expected to do, and there's no thank you. I see some changes today. Nowadays, you can see a lot of town halls being done by many companies. People are being given recognition, but by and large, it's not done across the board. So it needs to be done more and more of it over time. Now, I've covered a fair bit of information now. So to your question, how do you detect good leadership traits? The psychometric profiling is a starting point. The performance appraisal is a second point. And then the third point is that you need to start choosing your potential leaders and taking them through the acceleration center or the assessment center and see where they stand, then develop them on a customized development program for leadership. And there are many levels, but I won't go into all that. That's getting a bit too technical. Sorry, I'm taking too much time, Daniel.
No worry, no worry. Okay, right now I'm going through some of the question coming from the participant,
Mhm.
right? And hang on. So I think coming from Salomon Reyes, can a
Solomon.
person at an entry level job be a leader as well? If the answer is yes, then to what extent a person be the leader and what could be the level of expectation? I think both of you have a free hand to address this.
Mhm.
Uncle, you want to start out with this first or Dr.
Okay,
Chow?
maybe Dr.
Uncle?
Chow first. I've been speaking for quite some time.
Okay, Dr. Chow?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, he is talking about inquiring about an entry level job, right? Well, leaders has not many people is actually aware that they have a tendency to type leaders with very high level position, which is not naturally so because a leader can be from the perspective of a group, a very small sort of work group, not necessarily to be the CEO or MD of a company or organization.
Mhm.
So at the entry level job level, he could, for example, be entrusted with the assignment as the team leader for a certain assignment. So this is where he too has to display the kind of attribute expected of a leader to be effective. So with that in place, you find that the answer, if you say yes, to what extent a person can be leader. So that itself is self-governed by that attribute. So what is needed, I always have this burning advice for a lot of young leaders or potential candidate to be a CEO or MD.
Mhm.
Please be reminded that there is no shortcut. There is no shortcut to be a leader. Leaders are not, I do not believe that leaders are born. Leaders can be trained, leader can be coached, leaders could be equipped with the right tools, right attribute, right characteristics, right traits that what Unku have just described. So the important, essentially, things that probably someone could consider is to equip yourself. raise your capabilities level, because you can start off at your entry level job as a leader. Start off with, okay, you're given an assignment, do it well, lead it well, conduct the meeting, conduct the sort of action plan that is clearly defined, that your metrics of measure of performance are in place, your assessments are fairly conducted, then you are able to gather all the required information for a measured decision to be provided to the team. And your level of result outcome has to be made known, and the expectations, so that any gaps in between could be closed, and you should be involved. You must be seen to lead the leader, to be a leader, to be in front of the team to lead. Just like I always, the analogy is to relate it to a battle. To me, every day as a leader is a battlefield out there. So if you are not able to lead as a leader in front of the team or the troop, you cannot be a leader. A leader do not stand behind a team. The leader leads by standing ahead and leading the whole troop. And that your entry level job as a leader still can be considered as a leader, is because you are looking at various perspectives, from a lower level, mid-level. You start off at your entry job level, your senior level. You can be at the board of directors, could be your executive director or the managing director. So it depends which level of your job level you're talking about. But as I've just mentioned, learn your attribute, learn your capabilities. Leaders can be coached, can be groomed, can be trained, right? So as what Unku has also mentioned, these are a good startup point for Simon, and I wish him well. Yeah, you're on the right track. By virtue you're able to bring out that question. I think you have really
Yes.
something within your mindset. You are really targeting a certain level of achievement. Thank you.
Uncle, what's your take?
Right. Okay. The first question: can a person at an entry level job be a leader as well? The answer is yes, because leaders exist at all levels. At the entry level, if I get the meaning right from Salmun, you're talking about someone who comes in at a non-manager level, but someone who comes in as a graduate at an executive level. Yes, you are also a leader. But the thing is that you need a lot of polishing, a lot of development. The sad thing that I find lacking today, and maybe I'm guilty of that over my career, is that we don't really develop proper development programs for people like the way the military do. Do you know that if you are commissioned as an officer, you will have to undergo what we call a platoon leaders course, a PLC. So you learn the art of man management, how to be a leader, how to project that personality, that persona, that charisma. We don't do that in the private sector, and that's something that's
Yeah.
missing a lot. Huh? We send people to do courses like on finance, on management, but management and leadership are two different things.
Yes.
But to be a leader, you have to be developed, you have to be nurtured. Okay, and that's the way things are done today. So yes, you can come in, but you need a lot of development. And I always advise organizations develop a leadership framework that develops a person from entry level to becoming a senior executive. And then the initial appointment as a manager, a junior manager. Then after that, you go to become a manager, also another level of development. And then you go to becoming a general manager and to be a vice president. At all those stages along the way, the requirements are different. They are much more tougher as you grow up the career ladder, and the development methodology is different, and the focus on the training is different. But you do need to go through all that, and I don't believe in boy wonders. Okay, by that I don't believe that young people should be given senior roles as general manager and directors, because they haven't
Yeah.
learned the art of leadership yet. They haven't got their hands where you have to serve your time in the trenches. Okay,
Yes.
you have to be and get your hands dirty before you can start ordering people around. So learn
Mhm.
that and be patient. The time will come. Through your performance you will rise, and if you are a top performer, you can be selected to be what we call in Citibank the deep reach, where you are at
Mm.
a very young age. Where I was involved in one program where if you were a senior executive already, you were already being picked up for a possible double promotion to go up. So those are the
Mhm.
possibilities that can happen. I'm always careful about doing that, because when you are assessed you are being assessed for the next job.
Yeah.
Okay, when in the acceleration center, you are being assessed for the next job. Many people, those 50 people that I told you about, that only 15 made it, was because those 35 people were being assessed for the next higher level job. And many people in every one of us has got a ceiling, and I believe that, beyond which you cannot rise any further, for whatever reason. Is it capability? Is it attitude? Is it just plain performance? But everyone, so it's a pyramid structure. Not everyone can become a vice president. Not everyone can become a CEO. Okay, so it's a pyramid that becomes very, very, when you reach the apex. Not everyone from the same batch that you went through in university will
Hmm.
be together with you at the finishing line.
Wow. This is heavy load stuff. Okay. We have another very good question coming from Mr. James. Can you share briefly how the assessment was conducted to test leadership level? I think this is very much direct to Ongku, right?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
believe
yeah,
so. Yeah.
yeah. Um, I would recommend anyone to go to an assessment center. The assessment centers were created about 50 years ago, maybe 60 years ago, by the US Army. And they contracted this organization called DDI to design. So, what they believe was the philosophical approach is this: in order to be a leader, you must be very good in, let's say, 10 to 12 competencies, and all this will be defined. Okay, so you are tested on each and every competency. Now, I had the experience of going through the assessment myself when I was with one of my organizations, and I can tell you it was 2 days of stress. You were put under a pressure cooker environment. You were given problems that you had to resolve. You were given, in my case, I was given actual problems to solve. I was asked to develop a proposal. I was given at one time about 45 minutes to develop a PowerPoint presentation to convince the panel to accept a proposal to go into a line of business. 45
Hmm.
minutes.
Wow.
So you are under pressure all the time. Okay, and then you are also tested on your communication abilities. How well do you write? And this is another thing that I have to stress to everyone.
Yes.
You must have the ability to write, and write very well, to present your thoughts on paper. Okay, and then they also test you on how you deal with people, supervisory functions. You are put into a situation where you are faced with a lot of problem. You have to define the situation, and then you have to find out the solutions to overcome those problems. And that's why many people don't do well, because
Hmm.
they just don't have that ability to
Hmm.
deal with complexities. As you rise up the career ladder, when you move into senior level positions beyond that of a manager, the job gets tougher. Okay, so these are the things that are done. So the
Agree.
assessment center was done over 2 days, and I can tell you, when I finished the second day, um, I was at the Mega Mall. I went out, and it was like I went in at about 7 o'clock in the morning. I left the place at about 7:30, 8 p.m. at night. It was
Hmm.
continuous, and I had to only about half an hour for lunch. I was literally eating on while I was working on the computer, and it was very frenetic, very fast paced. I didn't realize things were very stressful, and but at the end of the day, I felt so mentally and physically drained. But
Hmm.
apparently the results were good because I was chosen. So
That's good. It's part and parcel of the process, one thing for sure.
yes,
I
yeah.
hope your feedback can help James a lot. I'm sure James can reach out to you.
Of course.
Right. Okay.
And
What I'm going to do,
Mhm.
I'm going to have a one-to-one session right now, probably for 10 minutes with Dr. Charles. Right. Give me a moment. Okay. Okay. The next question, next five questions, is purely directed at Dr. Chow. What is your doctorate thesis focus for under Matisa College PPA? What is the area that you research into? It's still
Well,
fresh in your mind, right? I'm sure.
still fresh. I defended my thesis somewhere in January, and got the whole closure by February. Well, it was a case study, particularly to assess the impact, the mediating effect of job satisfaction and job empowerment
Mm.
on relationship between leadership styles and employee performance. You may ask why these three leadership styles that actually have been highlighted in my thesis or my research proposal on the relation between transformation,
Mm-hmm.
transactional, and democratic leadership. The reason why I've chosen the three particular leadership style is because this is something very prominent in the plantation setting, and I've been involved with a lot of turnaround. And I was more under the impression or the insight that transformational leadership and transitional leadership were the core leadership styles that have been undertaken or involved in transformation of company. But interestingly, when I moved into the research review for 20 years research that was conducted, I was actually dumbfounded to establish there were barely a dozen of research being carried out worldwide
Wow.
on
A lot
leadership
of gap.
styles in the plantation. So this is where the beginning of my challenge. And I realized that by virtue of that 20 years of research, there were barely a dozen carried out on leadership style
Mm.
in plantation setting. Most settings were done in Indonesia and India and Sri Lanka, some in Africa. But not even if I could count my five fingers or couldn't just get the numbers
So
filled
you're
up.
performing a qualitative or quantitative?
Or it was a quantitative assessment. It's a descriptive research design, which I actually established to define the relationship within the style. Of course, the relevance and the existence of the mediating factors were established that their existence and it's relevant in a plantation setting. And it was a very broad-based sort of assessment that I went through because job satisfaction and job empowerment, those mediating factors, you'll be surprised that I have 123 questions now.
Whoa.
It was so in-depth that each time when I extend the questionnaire, I realize that I want to examine more. And then I land up with 123 questions in my research questionnaire. And to reach out to 234 respondents in the plantation was very interesting. And be mindful that it's during the pandemic
Oh,
occasion that how do you reach them. So, I mean, fortunately, because it's within the same company, I was actually overseeing 80 plantations and 10 mills throughout Malaysia, all 9 states, uh, 230 respondents spread over 80 estates and 10 mills, all over Malaysia, from Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsula. Of course, I engaged the monkey survey and I got it through. And of course, coming from that group, MD and the CEO, my memo to them was effective. I got
wow.
100% response rate.
Whoa.
I got 100 response rate, and I got it back within that 5 days duration.
Wow, that is
All the
really fast
questionnaire.
turnaround.
It
Really
was
fast
a
turnaround.
it was a record sort of response that I get from people. So that sort of commitment and I'm getting from my people. This is where probably they recognize me as their leaders and the relevance of the research. Of course, how the manner I was able to put the email to them, the memo to them. I got all the response within the set time period. And interestingly, the primary data was, of course, with the quantitative orientation and exactly from lower, middle, and the higher management level. Over 70 or 80 estates and 10 million can imagine. I just imagine it's a miracle that I could complete. And took me a very short period to complete the thesis and running through the statistic analysis was very, very challenging with 124 questions, right?
Yeah.
So that was, in a way, very astounding for me to able to establish the relationship between transformational, transactional, and democratic. But interestingly, the finding established or identified numerous insights and beneficial inferences. And the industry, this is the industry first to investigate the perspective of the three major leadership styles in plantation setting in Malaysia. So the impact on plantation performance is very relevant. I think it is something that I was very enriching. And surprisingly, I discovered that empowerment or the job empowerment, both of them actually were essentially important in the plantation setting. But empowerment, the job empowerment was far more critical and more important in the plantation setting compared with job satisfaction. So when we talk about empowerment behavior in that sense, I established that there is expectation of greater accountability in the plantation setting. There is also a self-directed decision-making requirement expected of my managers. And the level of information sharing is critical. So these were all new findings, and in fact, the examiner was encouraging me to. They suggested 8 books that I should be writing about.
Whoa!
I said, my goodness,
From
are they
one
giving me
research, even to translate into 8 books.
8
That's very
books?
rich.
So this was a very a lot of new knowledge were actually established from the research, and of course the other 2 aspects is the skills development that are expected from the empowerment and the coaching for innovative performance. So these are areas is totally new in the plantation setting, and that is on an empowerment behavior. What about the job satisfaction perspective? You talk about that is avenue for nature of work and benefit consideration and refinement. That also from the element of promotion. And this is where Ungku mentioned about career development. So from that, I established called a career passbook. A career passbook. That means it's a pathway for the conductors, for the staff, for the assistant, for the cadet, all the way up to the GM level. So they will carry a book with all the modules listed, year 1, year 2, whatever their experiences, the skill sets, the capabilities, what capacity they should be in are all actually in that passbook. It's a passport to your career development. So those are the assessment in addition to what James was inquiring just now. This is a way to how we actually assess. Plantation is a very long haul career development phase that you go through. We start off with a cadetship when we were young planters, and we are coached from operation, from you need to know. We are actually cover all aspects of the business. We need to know about medical, we know about operation, we know about planting, we know about soil science, plant science, talk about meal processing, you talk about even plantation medicine, we have to pass the paper those days. So we actually, it encompasses everything that we need to know as a planter. And from there, you can see job satisfaction, the research that I established. Beside the promotion, we talk about the work plans. There were expectations that work plans had to be very defined to increase the level of job satisfaction in the plantation, informing the executive managers, even the general managers. And of course, these findings from these element of recognition and reward, and also the training, all comes very handy. Then, of course, I will elaborate further when I start writing on these elements. It will be very beneficial to the plantations or planters at large, because I spent 40 years in it. Even my own expectation of my research was really, it came as a big surprise. I actually did not expect that. And the democratic styles, leadership style was the more dominant style, but all 3 styles were present. Transformational, transactional were present, democratic were present. But the more dominant style and preferred style and the more successful leadership style is democratic leadership, not transformational, which I was initially under the impression, because having done a lot of transformation in plantation and the changes that are so transactional. But the research established, no, it was To me, it is democratic leadership style. And leadership style is not when you operate a company as a leader, you do not actually work on just a particular style, for example, democratic leadership
Yes.
style. I actually, for effective leader, you have even sometimes use up to 6 leadership styles to get
Mm-hmm.
a project through, because it also translates and also have a fall back to the situation that we face. We may have to change to transformational or transactional or
Mm-hmm.
more participative or even servant leadership or more
Mm-hmm.
visionary leadership. So sometimes I find I use even 3 leadership at just one sitting. Sometimes I use
Mm-hmm.
one dominant one. Sometimes I use even up to
Mm-hmm.
5 leadership styles. So this is something very interesting, and I think it's very insightful. And for planters to be given this such of findings and the kind of values that you can add to the research, a lot of knowledge gaps really need to be examined. And the model that I've actually established was something new. It's a new model. But once the book is out, then only I think you can be recognized as a model that can be adopted. And I think this is something that is very valuable for the plantation, particularly because the setting is true to type. And we are able to establish that, oh, there's a lot of work to be done in a plantation setting. And
Yes.
sadly, it has taken us more than 100 years, and we have not really established all this.
Oh,
Okay, that's all I have to say
okay.
about my little research here.
I have to relate to the second question to Unku. Just give me a moment. Hang on, Unku. I'm going down to it. Okay. Okay. It's a bit personal.
Ah,
So far,
okay.
how does the DBA journey help you, my friend? Personal and
Ah,
professional level. There's two level
mhm.
here.
Well, you okay? On a personal level, it has always been my ambition to do a doctorate. In fact, I almost started doing it about 15 years ago, but then career got in the way because I was working for
Mm,
a multinational company. I was having a global role. 60% of my time was spent on the road or outside the country, so didn't have the time to do so. And today, if I had the ICT capabilities then probably I would have been able to manage it better compared to today. So it's my on a personal level, it has always been my plan to do a doctorate. So far, the journey has been quite okay. Um, I wouldn't say entirely smooth, but I feel that the results of having worked for so long across industries and also having done international roles have enabled me to bring to deploy all my knowledge and skills and experiences to be able to handle all the courses so far. So in that sense, I think it's okay. In terms of professional development, I have now moved into a role where I provide consultation to organizations. Uh, so if you ask me whether the DBA is helping me in the professional development, I think on the how shall I say it, on the academic rigor
mm,
that I would have to deploy when I meet up with potential clients, for example. You have to be very deep in the subject matter. So the training that the DBA gives helps me to do it, but the DBA will not help me in any way in my career. It's just a
mm.
personal objective
Right.
that I embarked on. So my own self fulfillment.
Probably more of an extension of your curiosity as well, right?
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yes, wish I'd done it 15 years ago.
Yeah, time may not permit.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right now, I'm going to relay back to the question coming from the participant. Right.
Mhm.
Hang on. I'm going to bring back up. Okay. So this is a question from Karen Ong. Fully agree with Doctor, right, about the character of effective leadership must possess integrity, problem solving,
Mhm.
empowerment, and display empathy. Major of the organization today may only focusing on employees' KPI achievement. What do
Mhm.
you guys take on KPI and leadership these days?
Okay,
Either
perhaps I'll just answer that. Interestingly, she highlighted, Karen, thank you for raising that employees' KPI achievement. I will speak from the perspective of the plantation setting. What we have actually done, KPI is tied very closely to balance scorecard. And Ungku is an expert on balance scorecard. He will be providing the more in-depth
Yeah.
insight on the
Yeah.
KPI achievement.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of companies, for the sake of doing the annual appraisal and KPI assessment, it is not conducted correctly. And as a result of that failure, many of the employees are not given the fair assessment and not able to gauge their ability, nor were they given the right reward and recognition. And sadly, this is something that is seen in a lot of companies. And it takes the leaders, an effective leader, to really consider this. This is a very, very important area to really consider. A balanced scorecard is an effective tool. Of course, plantation we have started it some years back when I took the helm the leadership of Trade Winds. I introduced the balanced scorecard. I personally find it is something very objective, something that is fair, something that is able to assess the operational requirement and also the result outcome. And of course, we have done modification to the general design of the balance scorecard. And today, even with the new company I'm in, we are also embarking on that. And so we find that with that, you find that the employees' achievement is fairly undertaken, fairly assessed, and also fairly given the due recognition and the reward. We are actually on a profit sharing basis. So for my this new company that I'm heading is more important and critical that we have an accurate, objective, and effective KPI assessment, or else we bring up the wrong amount to the wrong person. So this is where I will. That's all I have to say, Karen. Thank you for raising that. Not to worry. I think if you're in the right company with a balanced scorecard, the appraisal will be fairly conducted and the due recognition be given. Thank you.
Uncle, what's your
Okay.
take on KPI?
Right. Okay. Now KPI fall in the realm of performance management. Okay. And if you're talking about if the KPIs, you're talking about a performance management system. The most well-known is of course the balance scorecard, which was pioneered by Kaplan and Norton. And I think Dr. Chow has mentioned about how he has been able to apply and deploy the tool in Trade Winds. I have been using the balance scorecard for well over 20 years now. And in fact, I am a balance scorecard professional. And by January, I will be given another certification, a balance scorecard master professional. So I'll be like the Sifu of the balance scorecard. Now already Sifu lah.
Okay.
But
Master Sifu.
this is Master Sifu. And I worked very, very closely with it in my last role, where over a period of about 4 years, I introduced it to this organization and the subsidiaries and all, which consisted of the 7 strategic business units, as a way of focusing the organization to be a strategy focused organization. Many companies, when they do their business planning, they have come up with all these vision, mission, and then the overarching strategy, and then they come up with
Yes.
all these strategies. What's missing is the implementation piece, and that's where the KPIs come in. When you have defined your KPI, your overarching strategies, the 2 or 3 overarching strategies and the themes, then you develop your detailed objectives. From those detailed objectives, you're supposed to be clear on your targets, your measurables, as well as the one thing that's missing in many balance scorecard, which I see today. What are the strategic initiatives required to make that come true, the KPI come through? That part is missing.
Yeah.
And this is where I do a lot of help for consultation to clients. I've just finished a major assignment in Indonesia, and I'm going on the second part, and I'll be starting a new one with an organization in East Malaysia. So it's a very powerful tool. So many employees ask, where do they fit in all this? It's a very good question, and you should be asking your boss, because if it works out well, the um, the key objectives at the corporate level should be cascaded down to the departments, and from the departments it should be going
Yes.
down to the managers and then down to the officers. I don't recommend balance scorecard for junior staff. It simply doesn't work.
Yes.
I focus on behavior type of assessments for them, but you can drill it down to the executive level, but it has
Mhm.
to be cascaded. So you don't expect the executive to carry the level of accountability of the manager of the department, or the
Mhm.
manager or the head of the division. It has to be broken down. So if it's done correctly, it will be able to demonstrate the results. And many organizations have been
Okay.
successful in doing that. It's just that many employees at the junior level don't see how their contribution makes a difference
Yes.
to the organization in terms of the bottom line. So that part
Mm.
requires a lot of communication. And as a leader, you're supposed to communicate. This is one of
Well, looks like a lot of the
the
why
requirements.
factor need to be ironed out, right?
Yes, true. True. It's a wonderful tool. I'm earning my living doing it. So I cannot say so too much about you should use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Okay, here comes to the final question. Quite interesting
Mhm,
question. Come
mhm,
from Mr. Wong Ta Ming.
mhm.
Can an introvert person be a good leader? If no, how can he sharpen his leadership skill period to taking up the leadership role? What is your take? Dr. Charles, you want to lead on this?
Very interesting question. Can an
Very
introvert
good question.
person be a good leader? My answer to that is yes. Why? Because a good leader can be trained. An introvert person can be changed. Perhaps what I would suggest is Tak Ming could consider, if you find an introvert, join the Toastmaster Club first. You learn to project yourself, you learn to speak with confidence, you learn to interact. And you find that that is your a good platform for you to kickstart, to transform your introverts concern that you have,
Mhm.
if that is reflective of your position, nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, I remember when I was a young planter, when I was asked to present in front of the senior management, you know what sort of trauma that a young planter will go through. So you go through a position that without experiencing what the challenges are, you will never be able to get out of it. So sharpening the schools will come through as you understand what are the platforms that are available, where are they being provided, who are these service provider. Perhaps even can approach Unku for some help that your leadership skill could be sharpened. It's not a problem. Of course, what I mentioned too, prior to taking off any leadership skill, you need to be equipped. You need to be equipped. You need to have this of the build up the characteristic. You need to build up the attribute. So it's a learning process. It's a long journey, but should not stop at that. You can actually sharpen your leadership skill. It's something that can be nurtured, something that can be tapped on, something that can be sharpened, something that you actually garner and do read about leadership skills. Do read about books that are written by John Maxwell. You can read about so many of them. That you can John. So many of them. If I name, I think there'll be, I don't know. There are many decades written on leadership. After screening through, I think I have exhaustion. My eyes have been really badly strained because of the same words leadership have been screened to, don't know, hundreds of thousands of times the same word. So don't be disheartened. Leadership could be sharpened. Do read up, to go through the practical training. Nothing but practice makes perfect. You can train yourself, learn to speak in front of people, learn to lead, learn to make mistake, and learn to correct from your mistake. And you can be a better person, a better leader, and more effectively. Right? Thank you.
Uncle, what do you think? Introvert,
Yeah, I
can
think I,
they?
I, I, I answered that question earlier on during
Right.
my discussion. But whether is it nature or nurture, it can be both. But you can be nurtured to be a leader. Okay, that's very clear. This has been done a number of times. Now, as to your personality, we all have our personalities, and I've related to you about people that I work with who have a very introverted personality style. I have to be to show say something to caution the people who are introverted. You are going to stress your personality, okay, if you are operating in a domain where you are not comfortable. So you have to be very clear what you are capable of achieving. You can be developed to be a leader. Whether you are comfortable about being in those roles is another question. But leaders can be developed. I would say that at an early point in my life, I was a bit of an introvert. But when I went to study in the US, my personality underwent a 180-degree change.
Well,
So that by the time I came back, I was a very different person. And it depends on how life has treated you, the experiences that you go through. Why is a person introvert? There must have been something that happened at an early part of his life
yes.
that made him become an introvert. Okay, but having said that, and I'm not an organizational psychologist or a psychiatrist, but people's personalities can be shaped and they can be formed, and you can go through a nurturing process, and you can end up becoming a leader. It's just that if it's so innate, you may not feel comfortable. And I mentioned earlier, there might be a situation where it can create a conflict in you, an innermost conflict, and something will give. So you must know yourself. And if you don't go through all these profilings and psychometric testing, then so that you can get some interpretation from those who are qualified. Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful answer from both of you. Dr. Charles,
Hmm.
Uncle, really thanks a lot. But
Hmm.
one thing that I really want to thank is that
Hmm.
Mantisa College has been
Hmm.
able to bring all of us together here to
Hmm.
share our insight
Right.
as we
Hmm.
travel our DBA journey. I actually wanted to invite all the participants that are considering doing DBA, reach out to Shang, okay? Let
Hmm.
him guide you to sign up the program, and he will be able to bring a lot more insight to prepare you to go through the journey what we participating right now. This discussion is not out of a blue. All of us are going through the process, and we end up overloaded with our new discovery.
Yeah.
Please don't stop for all the participants today. Do contact Mantisa College to get more
Yeah.
insight.
Yeah.
And for everyone, Uncle, Dr. Charles, and the
Yes.
participant and Mantisa, thank you
Hmm.
for a wonderful sharing session today. Thanks a lot. Now
Thank
we
you.
call it a day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.